You know, my memory of Technicolor stems from the films of the 40s when I was less aware of the filmmakers and more aware of, certainly the genre. I mean, obviously the Disney films, I think, were Technicolor. Snow White, Pinocchio. Pinocchio is one of the most beautiful animated films ever made, and unusual films like The Three Caballeros or these films had vivid, spectacular color, and I think all were Technicolor. Technicolor was, of course, synonymous with quality because it truly was a different process than the normal photochemical process. Technicolor was a three primary colors recorded on separate medium, which was not a photographic film, but what we call the imbibition process. It was sort of like a printer that actually, like lithography, printed the primary colors on a piece of celluloid, and that's why the color was so true and so lasting, because Technicolor, the tri-strip Technicolor process was to this day among the most long-lasting preservation of the image. Yes, beyond the famous Technicolor process, which was the three-strip imbibition process, Technicolor became just a very, wonderful laboratory to work with in whatever your film needs were, and certainly in the Cotton Club, we have worked very assiduously with them to take a movie that was made over 20 years ago, where much of the negative was lost, and in an attempt to add back the full version, adding back almost a half an hour, Technicolor was essential in what they did for us. The work, Technicolor Rome was a very important factor in the work of Vittorio Storaro and of Apocalypse Now, and even though that was made in the Philippines, that was pretty much an Italian production, and Technicolor lovingly cared for every frame of film. Technicolor, as a laboratory, was always a great collaborator with the cinematographers, and in a process so complex, that commitment to beauty and to excellence, which the cinematographer, was his lifeblood. Technicolor was the lab that really rose to those challenges. In the case of Technicolor, although it's not that old a film, it is still, I guess, approaching probably 20 years old, and there was a cut of it which was the result of a lot of what we call horse trading. In other words, there were different people involved who financed it and who were the distributors of it, so there were different feelings expressed, and ultimately what the director in my position tries to do is to try to find a happy medium that will please the people who paid for it and the people who worked so hard on it. But I always had a long running regret that ultimately 30 some odd minutes of the film was cut out. But we found that when we tried to put it all back together and add the 30 minutes, that we couldn't find it all. We couldn't find all the negative. Some of it was in Seattle, some of it was here, some of it was somewhere else. And in the end, there was a certain percentage of the film that we couldn't find the negative of, and we ultimately found some work prints, which meant that we could derive a negative from the work print, but there was going to be a price to pay for that in quality, that you would say you would see the beautiful imagery of Stephen Goldblatt, and then all of a sudden it would change in its nature, and that's where there had been negative made from print. So Technicolor just went through it frame by frame with great skill and patience and artistry, and restored parts of the film where the negative had been lost, but where we had print, to a degree of perfection that that you couldn't tell the difference between it and the actual negative part. It's very painstaking, laborious work. Some of it has been automated, but not all of it. And I found the Technicolor team just so great, and you know, mainly aside from their skill and the time they put in and the expertise, the fact that in their hearts they wanted to do it. They wanted it to look as beautiful as the photographer had captured and the film motion had captured, and yet in the circumstances parts had been lost and then had to be replaced with inferior elements, and they just used total effort to bring these so-called inferior or multi-generational, where it is a copy of a copy, and made it look all as if it's one negative. They were great, and I'm extremely grateful and hoping that if audiences enjoy this new version of the Cotton Club, which I think they will, because oddly enough, although it's 30 minutes longer, it plays like an hour shorter. Their thanks are due to Stephen Goldblatt and the Technicolor team who helped him do this restoration. Well, Technicolor, 100 years, that's probably as close as you can get to the actual birth of cinema. So in congratulating Technicolor for these 100 years, I'm citing the fact that Technicolor was there practically from the beginning, and I can only say a company so dedicated to beauty and technology and the cinematic form, I can only wish that it has another 100 years. And I don't think we've heard the last of the Technicolor process, the imbibition process. I realize it's perhaps unwieldy when you compare it to electronic cinema, but there was a beauty and a luster and most of all a longevity. Technicolor, if you have your film on Technicolor masters, you have them for as close to forever as we are able to say. So may they keep using the spirit of invention and the tradition of their founders to go on to come up with yet more wonderful technology. Congratulations, 100 years Technicolor.